Let's start with what we can actually measure, because the rhetoric around AI and creative work tends to run about 5 years ahead of the data in both directions. People who say nothing is happening and people who say everything is over. Both are wrong, and here are the numbers. In May 2024, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the median annual salary for graphic designers was $61,300. 2% projected employment growth from 2024 to 2034, slower than the average across all occupations, which is 3%. 20,000 job openings predicted annually over the decade. But the BLS is careful to note that most of those openings come from people leaving the profession, not from new positions being created. The field is not growing, it is replacing itself. Meanwhile, over the same period, a UX designer, someone working one step up the abstraction ladder, thinking about users' flow and systems rather than executing visuals assets, earns a median of $109,000 per year. According to Glassdoor's 2025 data, a senior UX researcher at a major tech company earns about $130,000 to $165,000. At Meta and Google, median total compensation for UX role sits above $200,000. Same industry, overlapping skills. The salary gap between a graphic designer executing someone else's brief and a UX strategist helping shape what the brief should be is roughly $50,000 to $150,000 per year. The gap was always there. What's changed is that AI has started to widen it at an incredible pace, and to make movement between the two tracks significantly harder for people who haven't already crossed. The design industry have spent 20 years telling people that craft is the foundation, and you have to master execution before you can move into strategy. That hierarchy was always partially self-serving methodology built by agencies that needed affordable junior labor. And in the AI era, it's actively harmful career advice. A peer-reviewed study by Hue, Rashif, and Zhou, published in Organization Science in 2024, tracked freelance workers on one of the world's largest gig platforms before and after AI image generation tools went public. The results are specific and uncomfortable. Graphic design job posting on the platform dropped 17% within months of Midjourney and DALL-E 2 launching. 3D modeling jobs dropped 15% in the same window. Writing jobs fell 30%. Software development postings were down 20%. The declines were not spreading evenly across experience levels. In fact, the paper found that the earnings drop hit hardest among experienced, higher-priced freelancers. So, why experienced workers and not beginners? Because their clients had the most to gain from switching. If a client was paying a senior illustrator $120 an hour, switching to a $20 Midjourney subscription is a bigger saving than replacing a $15 an hour beginner. The higher the rate, the stronger the incentive to automate. This is the opposite of what most designers expected. The aggregated data from JP Morgan Research confirms it from a different angle. Their economists looked at the unemployment rates by college major. Graphic design graduates are now showing significant spikes in unemployment, in the same bracket as computer engineering majors and architecture graduates. And this isn't graduates who never found work. That cohort entered a market that had already shifted under their feet before they arrived. Now, if you're watching any YouTube video about AI and jobs in the last 2 years, this is a point where someone reassures you that the technology will create more jobs than it replaces. And that's probably true in aggregate. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report 2025 surveyed employers covering 14 million workers globally and projecting 92 million roles displaced by 2030, alongside 170 million new ones created. That's net positive, great. But the same report found that 41% of employers globally plan to reduce its headcount, specifically in areas where AI can automate tasks within the next 5 years. So the new jobs will be real, and the displaced jobs will also be real. And whether you end up in one category or the other depends on decisions you make now, not later. Let's talk about what those decisions actually look like. Because learn AI tools is not an answer. It's barely even a starting point. In Upwork's 2025 data, AI skills on the platform commanded earnings roughly 40% higher than equivalent non-AI work. Freelancers with AI integrated offerings made more per hour than those without. That sounds like a clear signal. Add AI, earn more. But the Upwork data also shows something more detailed, highly detailed. The people capturing that 40% premium were not designers who'd simply learned to use Midjourney on top of their existing practice. They were people who already had domain expertise, understanding of brand systems, user behavior, visual hierarchy, client management, and then added AI fluency on top of that foundation. AI skills alone, without the underlying domain expertise, earn around the platform median. It's the combination that unlocks the premium. The tool doesn't create the value. The expertise directs the tool, and the tool creates the value. And right now, a lot of advice being given to designers is essentially learn the tool without grappling honestly with what kind of expertise actually survives the transition. There are 3 broad segments of the design market, and they're moving in different directions at different speeds. The execution first segment is the largest and the most disturbed. These are designers who value in delivering exactly what their client asks for: reliable, fast, consistent output. This has long powered the freelance economy, but it's also where AI is hitting the hardest. When the alternative is $20 and 10 minutes instead of $500 and 3 days, the trade-off is obvious. The systems and strategy segment is growing. These designers work one level up, defining the problem, structuring the brief, and mapping users' journey before any visuals are created. Research shows high AI exposure here, but also full adaptability. These designers aren't replaced by AI, they use it. The value shift from execution to direction. The third segment, cultural translation. It's smaller but important. These designers create work rooted in deep, lived understanding of specific communities or subcultures. AI can mimic styles, but it struggles to capture what actually feels authentic. Here, the mode is insider knowledge, and that's harder to replace. Most of the positive takes on AI and design, the AI is just like a tool, like Photoshop was like a tool argument, are technically accurate and practically useless because they describe what happens at the end of the transition rather than what it costs to survive the transition. When Photoshop was launched in 1990s, it took about a decade to fully restructure the pre-press and darkroom market. The 70% drop in freelance graphic design postings happened inside 12 months of Midjourney launch. The pace difference between these two transitions is not incremental, it is structured. The designers who made it through the Photoshop transition had a decade to adapt. The data right now suggests the current window is way shorter. Let's make this specific because abstract comparisons about speed are not actually useful either. I want to talk about stock libraries. For the last 15 years, stock contributions has been a significant secondary income stream for mid-career illustrators and photographers. The model was simple. You create assets, you upload them, you earn a loyalty every time someone licenses them. At scale, a serious contributor could make $20,000 to $40,000 a year passively from a good catalog. Not a primary income for most people, but a meaningful buffer. In 2023, Adobe integrated Firefly into Adobe Stock. Getty Images launched its own AI generator. Shutterstock signed a deal with OpenAI, a deal the company projected could generate up to $250 million by 2027. Getty's own filings acknowledged that its creative segment, the traditional stock photography and illustration business, declined nearly 5% year on year in 2025. The gains that offset that decline came from AI data licensing deals, not from human contributors. The platform's revenue strategy has pivoted away from paying creators and towards selling creators' archives work to AI companies. Meanwhile, the AI generators are simultaneously making the underlying human-created work less necessary for the platform's customers. Adobe Firefly's training data included Adobe stock images. The photographers and illustrators who uploaded that work received a Firefly contributor bonus, which Adobe has continued paying annually. The creative community's response to the bonus program has been consistent. The amount are widely regarded as inadequate relative to the commercial value the training generated. Many professional contributors have moved portfolios to competitor platforms. The designers who had built passive income streams on stock platforms were not consulted about this transition. They discovered it when their download count stopped growing, or when they received a bonus payment that didn't match what they expected from a decade of uploads. This is the part of AI and design conversations that doesn't get talked about enough. The disruption is not just coming from the technology itself, it's coming from the platforms. The same platforms the designers spent years building their businesses on, pivoting their own business models in ways that directly compete with the people who made them valuable in the first place. The designers most hurt by this were not the careless ones. They were the ones who had done everything right, built a serious catalog, maintained quality standard, played by the platform's rules. Their diligence was the thing that made them worth extracting from. Here's where the data gets more complicated and where I want to be careful not to simplify in the other direction. In 2025, Upwork In-Demand Skills report found that graphic design remained one of the most consistently demanded categories on the platform, year over year. Despite, or perhaps because of all the AI disruption, AI video generation and editing was up 329% year on year. AI image generation skills were up to 95%. The standard graphic design hadn't collapsed. What the data shows is not elimination, but bifurcation. The lower tier of the market is compressing rapidly, while the upper tier, designers who can direct AI outputs, make strategic decisions, and deliver work that requires genuine human judgment, is maintaining and in some cases growing. McKinsey 2025 research estimated that today's AI theoretically automate approximately 57% of current work tasks. 57% is large, but the word theoretical is doing a lot of work, and the most companies are nowhere near that for a long time. JP Morgan research noted in 2025 that less than 10% of firms in the broader economy indicated they were using AI regularly as of mid-2025. The gap between the technology's theoretical capability and its actual deployment is still substantial. The practical implication for designers is that the disruption is real and measurable, but it's not uniform, and it's not instantaneous. The freelance illustration market moves fast. The 17% drop in 12 months is documented. The broader in-house corporate design market is moving more slowly. But slowly is not the same as safety. And the people who traded "it hasn't hit my segment yet" as permanent protection are the same people who were surprised when the stock platforms pivoted. So what does the transition actually look like for someone trying to stay on the right side of it? The data points to three things. First, the designers currently capturing the premium, the 40% earning lift that Upwork documents for AI integrated work, are operating as directors rather than producers. They use AI to generate volume and variations, but the decisions about which direction is right, which output fits the brief, which versions has the right cultural register, which one will actually land with a specific audience, those decisions are theirs. The skill being rewarded is not prompt engineering. It's judgmental about outputs. And that judgment is not acquirable from a YouTube tutorial about Midjourney settings. It comes from the same place that good design judgment always came from. Sustained attention to what works and why, across hundreds of projects, refined over years. Second, a mid-career designer in the execution segment earning $61,300 at the BLS median is not competing primarily against other designers for the salary anymore. They're competing against a workflow that costs $20 a month and produces something 80% as good for the specific use case their client has. Clients who needed 100%, who needed exactly right for a demanding audience, were always the more valuable clients anyway. The AI era is clarifying which clients those are and separating them more sharply from the ones who were always mostly looking for the cheap and fast. Here's the thing about that 80% figure. In most of the markets where designers have historically made the bulk of their income, website banners, social media graphics, email headers, product mockups, marketing collateral for mid-market companies, 80% is enough. Not for the designer, of course, for the client. The gap between 80% and 100% has monetary value only if the client can perceive it and is willing to pay for it. In large segments of the market, they cannot and they are not. This is not a failure of clients. It's an accurate description of what those markets have always valued. Third, and this one is harder to quantify, but shows up consistently in the data on which designers are adapting successfully. People making it are the ones who made their thinking legible. Not just their output, but thinking. A portfolio showing finished work tells a client what you can execute. A case study that walks through what you made, the decision you made, what you rejected, what you learned from testing, how you navigated a constraint, tells a client a different story. It tells them that you have a process, that the output wasn't random, and that you can probably solve a problem they haven't described to you yet. This is a totally different pitch than here's what I can produce. The IXDF's research on UX salary drivers found that the factor most correlated with the above average compensation is the ability to connect design work to company goals and speak the language of the business. More than software proficiency, more than years of experience, more than education level. Designers with the highest compensation understands business strategy and contribute beyond visual decision. Let's talk about an imaginary designer, Sophia. Sophia spent 4 years in design school. She learned kerning. She built a Behance portfolio. She raised her rates in 2021. She bought the standing desk. Then things shifted. In 2023, clients started sending AI outputs and asking her to clean them up. Briefs got bigger. Her rate stalled, then dropped in 2024. She didn't reinvent herself overnight. She did something less glamorous. Spent 3 uncomfortable months learning tools like Midjourney, Runway, and Firefly just to understand what her clients were using. She took a lower-level contract to gain UX research experience. She wrote a breakdown of her design decisions instead of just showing final work. It got more traction than anything in her portfolio. 18 months later, her clients are different. They are not asking for assets. They are asking for her thinking. Her income is back to where it was in 2021. Not a big win, but she's working in a field she still recognizes, getting paid for something real. The designers who are not recovering are mostly in one of two places. Either they dismissed the disruption entirely and are now watching their clients' list thin out without a clear story about why, or they went hard on AI tools as a solution, became genuinely proficient at generating and prompting, and discovered that prompt proficiency without design judgment is not particularly valuable. Because anybody can learn prompting in a week, and clients know that. What the market is rewarding is the combination. The judgment that comes from years of design thinking fused with genuine fluency in what these tools can and cannot do. Neither element alone is sufficient. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects 2% growth in graphic design employment through 2034. The UX and the product design market is projected at 7% growth over the same period. The gap between those numbers, 7% versus 2% in the same decade, in the adjacent corners of the same field, is the size of a decision in front of anyone in design right now. Sophia is still Sophia. She still notices kerning mistakes in restaurant menus and tells people about them. She still has her strong opinions. She is still figuring this out. But she's working. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any question or any comment about the design and AI design, please leave them in the comment. This is Sungmin speaking from Jamilius. Thank you for watching.